Good morning, everybody, and welcome to DP Solutions webinar, the top IT investments for 2019. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to give everyone about a few more minutes to log in, and we will start.
Thanks everybody for attending. I know it's the holiday season and a lot of people are wrapping up, a little busy, so it's really great for everyone to be here. The way I look at this is that just sort of cap off the year. I wanted to sort of think about this as kind of like a webinar, kind of QBR, if you will, where we talk about some things, where I think maybe these items really should be on a lot of radars, in particular for our types of clients who are in the SMB space, where I think this stuff's underutilized. So we're going to go through a few things today. A lot of this is going to be, just a crash course on a few familiar pieces of technology, and then we're going to leave some time for some questions and answers. So if there's something in particular you wonder about for your organization, we can touch on that while on the call. So, just a little background here, technology solutions providers, and I would, characterize DPS as one, but also more vendors, companies like Microsoft and Google, or hardware companies like Cisco or HP or Dell, or you name it. I mean, there's just a million different technology companies out there. I feel like they really often do a poor job defining the value of their technologies to an end user as opposed to an IT guy. Someone like me can look at some of these switches and firewalls that come out and next gen stuff, and we really understand the value and why these things apply so well and why they matter. But to the end user, especially in the SMB space, they're really not properly equipped most of the time to know why these things matter, or if they matter, if they apply to them at all, or what the actual benefit is to the business person. So there's a lot of powerful technology out there, but not all of it's valuable to you, and sort of vice versa. So that all said, I think the items that we're going to talk about today are sort of things that I could see really having broad application to a lot of different organizations, regardless of vertical or size. A lot of this, I also think, focuses on being mobile and agile with work. I think as we continue to evolve into the cloud, good solutions for organizations need to be agile and give, platform flexibility, security, productivity, sort of all together. So we're going to get into a little bit of that today. So here are the criteria for the picks that we came up with, and we came up with 6 specific items. So first, they're suited for SMBs, so for the clients we tend to work with. And so, if you have, 10 to say 100 or 200 employees, I think there's definitely a case to be made for these pieces of technology to work for you. And just in general, they should be plausible for most organizations. It shouldn't be that to implement these types of solutions, it just won't work with your system or something like that. These solutions, we can pretty much apply to any kind of infrastructure behind it. I consider these to be bang for your buck solutions. So yes, you will have to, put in some money to implement, and maybe some of them have monthly fees and things like that. But we pick them because we feel that they actually have a real return on investment for the organization. So that by implementing these tools, we'll see a real benefit. Sometimes that's a productivity benefit. Sometimes that's a security or risk benefit. You'll see as we go. And lastly, I would consider them to have low adoption rates. And by low, I think I use the term low in the context of they should be higher in the space they're in. that maybe the industries that, or the vendors that make them might be really happy with the growth, but maybe I feel like, we don't have enough of our clients that are really on this yet, and people need to know about this and really consider it, because it has that bang for your buck. It really is plausible. It really is a part of the future, and perhaps in 2 or 3 years, these things are going to need to be in place for everyone. So why don't we get ahead of the curve on this? So the number one thing that I came up with for 2019 is making sure that if you are on Windows 7, or I guess if you are one of the people still on Windows 8, that you really get to Windows 10. The support, extended support, ends, I believe, on January 14th, 2020. And this is a huge thing. I've been running vulnerability tests and assessments and security, and these sort of flaws are a big thing that we need to deal with, because we don't want malware to take advantage of this stuff and take us down, or have some kind of data breach. I did an assessment just recently for a client where they were an entire Windows 10 shop except for one device, which was Windows XP. And if you looked at the vulnerability chart here, the vulnerabilities for the XP device were off the charts. And I bring it up in the context of Windows XP, but Windows 7 is going to be in that sort of bucket soon. On January 15th, 2020, you're going to see the number of vulnerabilities that we cannot remediate with Windows go up and up and up and up, and there isn't really anything that can be done about it. But I don't want to make that sound like the only reason to go to Windows 10. I use it personally on all my devices that can support it, desktops, laptops, things like that. If you get the right version of Windows 10, you get BitLocker drive encryption with the OS. So let's say we have a device, especially a mobile device, that moves around and has a lot of sensitive data on it. We're worried that that device could be stolen, lost on a cab or a bus or airplane or something like that, and we don't want that data to be breached. Well, we can encrypt those hard drives with the tools built into Windows 10. That's extremely powerful as a risk mitigation tool. And when you consider the fact that the move to Windows 10 isn't really that expensive, both for licensing and labor, and you get this drive encryption, we're going to have an OS that's agile that we can use for the next several years, so on and so forth. It really just makes a lot of sense to get this done now. We could also figure out if there's going to be any sort of technical problems with moving to Windows 10. We're concerned about software compatibility or something like that. Right now we have about a year to get this done. And if we start this process right now, then this will be pretty painless. But we don't want to be January 1st, 2020, migrating a bunch of machines to Windows 10, because any of the consequences we're going to have to deal with in real time, and that's really going to be a big challenge. But while we're on the topic of Windows 10, this is sort of a side tip. We really, I have a lot of clients, and this is something, again, I've seen during assessments when I go on site, not necessarily for my clients always, but sometimes for other organizations I look at or propose assessments for. We need to be careful about how we dispose of our tech, because as these data privacy concerns grow even more great, GDPR was this year, and I expect we're going to have more regulations. I expect we're going to see a US-style GDPR come here very shortly. We need to make sure that the drives and the devices we get rid of are disposed of well, and consider data sanitization or get drive destruction if the device is really sensitive. So I want you to keep that in mind, because migrating to Windows 10, we might have a significant challenge where we implement all this stuff and replace all this hardware. Well, then we need to get rid of the hardware and the data responsibly from the old legacy equipment. The second item is multi-factor authentication, and I bring this up because multi-factor authentication and credential exploitation, I believe, is the statistic is 81% of all cyber attacks start with credential misuse. And multi-factor authentication is probably the single best tool that can be used to stop that means of cyber attack. If you're not already familiar with multi-factor authentication, it's something you have. So, for example, like you have a credit card number on you or something like that, and something so like a password. So When you, the multi-factor authentication, for example, with a debit card often or a credit card, would be that little code on the back. So you put in your credit card and it asks you to validate the code, or your zip code or something like that. Maybe another example would be when you log in to your banking site or your PayPal site, as I'll sometimes do online, and you log in with your username and password, which you have a specific strength password, etc. And then you get a text message on your phone with a code, or you open up an Authenticator app, which has a constantly changing code. This is a really strong tool to reduce the risk of credential exploitation, someone logging in who's not you. And as we move to the cloud and have more of the cybersecurity in terms of the tech, maybe be on the cloud host end, it's really important that we make sure that we're not responsible for a data breach because someone abused our credentials. If let's say all our stuff is hosted with Amazon, and someone exploits our admin credentials into Amazon and then steals our data, that's not Amazon breaching the data, that's us breaching the data because we haven't properly managed credentials and authentication. So I would strongly recommend this in your organization if you're concerned at all about the accounts being compromised, and you should be concerned because it's a major, major threat. It's really important to note that smartphones have really made this a lot less complicated and difficult to implement than it was in the past. A few years ago when multi-factor authentication first started hitting the SMB space, tokens and stuff made it a little complicated, expensive, difficult. It's just a lot easier in 2018/2019. Another thing I'd like to focus on, especially for people who have road warriors, is things like personal 4G hotspots, or I guess 5G eventually, which is, speaks to the fact that ultimately we can't trust public Wi-Fi in places like Starbucks or airports or hotels, etc., especially for transmitting sensitive data. We don't know how these Wi-Fi networks are configured, if traffic is being skimmed, if there's any kind of encryption layer, if there's any kind of DNS routing or something that's happening that is controlling the flow of our data. And I've pulled out personal 4G hotspots here because that's basically your own gateway to the internet. But there's other solutions too that can help make personal use of a mobile internet connection safer, like a personal VPN or other connections that take your data and make it private over public networks. And so I would say that if you're an employee who moves a lot, or you have staff that moves a lot with devices and can connect from a variety of different physical locations, I'd really consider things like personal 4G hotspots, VPN connections, things like that. And ultimately, this is something we can help you with. Come with us, talk to us about what kind of devices you have, what you connect to, where you connect them from, so on and so forth. And we can help tailor kind of a personal, safe browsing, safe surfing, safe mobile working solution. Most of these things aren't really expensive either. I mean, you can get a limited bandwidth 4G connection very inexpensively per month. Personal VPNs are very inexpensive. This isn't that much of an investment, and the risk reduction is really significant. So again, this is another thing that as we are more mobile, as we do more work in the cloud, I think is just going to be something that's going to become more and more important. I'm going to pivot a little bit. We have another tip here. So travel smart. So here are a few smart tips to protect your information. So I don't really like using public charging stations because, especially with the USB, I mean, if you're using an AC adapter, I guess that's a little bit different in the wall, because there's chances are no one's going to be skimming your information from a wall, a traditional AC connection. But like these little public stations that sometimes pop up that have USBs, and you just hook your phone right up to it. We don't really know what's behind those things. I mean, theoretically, someone could, while that phone is taking a charge, could be taking data from that device, or could be hacked or something like that. And I'm very skeptical about using these things. You may have seen these little USB filters. So they're essentially on one end, they're a female connection USB, and on the other side the mail end, and you plug your charging cable into one end and the other end into the outlet, and that sort of filters your connection. I'm not sure how much I trust them, but the reason these products exist is because these public charging stations could theoretically be a source of data breach. So just keep that in mind. Never connect to open free Wi-Fi. I don't know, maybe if never is necessarily the right term, but you certainly shouldn't connect to these open free Wi-Fi things if you're not using a personal VPN. You shouldn't be doing it if you're doing really sensitive work via a free Wi-Fi. You know, if you are you know, just checking the news, maybe not such a big deal. But if you're you know, doing specific work, you probably don't want to use those free connections because you just don't have any control over the network. Use a privacy screen. You know, if you're in Panera Bread and you're doing work, whether it's a personal connection or the Wi-Fi with a VPN or something like that, there isn't any kind of encryption solution that can stop an eavesdropper looking over your shoulder and reading your information. And you know, their social engineering is a part of hacking, and reading people's keystrokes or looking at what's on their screen. You know, it's not unheard of that data is stolen this way. I mean, there's a reason that other products exist, like these privacy screens or data shields. You know, these things that you'll sometimes put around like your credit cards and things, so they don't get the magnetic information read. There is actually a physical threat for cyber attack too. So consider stuff like privacy screens or those special wallets. Turn off location sharing. I mean, if your application doesn't require location sharing, like for example, Google Maps or something like that, there's really no reason that most of these places need to know where you are. So you can disable your GPS or any kind of location sharing in browser. You know, if it's not necessary, I don't like giving information to people. I did a demo yesterday for a product that I was evaluating, and they wanted me to do a special kind of WebEx type session, and I was going to have to create an account and set a new email address up and do all this stuff, and I didn't want to give the information up. I just didn't want to sign up for this stuff because it's more information that someone else isn't entitled to. So don't give away your location. Don't give away your personal information unless you really have to. Always keep your devices in view. I mean, look, theft is a real thing, and it doesn't take long, especially these mobile devices, for them to be lost. And if you can, and you don't really need a connection, you can save a little on your battery too, you can set your device to airplane mode. And if your device is in airplane mode, all the radios are off, and it doesn't talk to anything. And you can't talk to something that doesn't have a connection, right? I can't hack into a phone from another phone or from a PC if that device isn't on a network. It doesn't see it. So consider all of that. And the last tip is to grab the safe travel checklist. You can see a little arrow here. If you've got the little GoToMeeting console, you'll see that we've got a special attachment. So there's all sort of safe travel checklist tips, and you can use that in the future. Maybe share it with your staff. We just think it's good information, and we always look to educate people. So feel free to take that, and feel free to let us know if you got any questions about that. Another item that I think really everybody should be doing these days is awareness training of some kind. A lot of the shift that is happening in cybersecurity, in particular as we move to the cloud, is attacks that are less focused on technology and more focused on users. I mentioned that assessment I was doing for vulnerability testing. If I have a device, a Windows 10 device, and I patch it and manage it well, and I set up good policies and configurations, and the user accounts aren't too loose, and they've got the right security products on them, antivirus, the like, that device is reasonably secured. I'm not going to say it's secured because anything can be broken into with the right know-how and resources, but the risk is very, very low. There's only one problem with that, which is that the user is now the vulnerable piece. And if the user is exploited to give up their credentials or volunteer information or click the wrong thing that's going to exploit a weakness that can't be easily fixed, there's not a lot that our technology can do with this. So if you're not really doing some kind of cybersecurity awareness training program right now, you really should consider it. I think most incidents that we experience today could have been prevented in hindsight if an action was taken differently. My rule is we aren't creating a team of security engineers where we want our staff to know how to identify and respond to threats. We don't need to commit tons and tons of knowledge. We don't need to put everybody in a room one day a month for 8 hours and lecture them about cybersecurity. We want to have short, bite-sized commitments, things with interactivity, small trainings focused on things we want to focus on, for things that our employees might face and might see without confusing them or muddying the water. Focus on the topics that really have the most impact. We want to determine what your organization's at risk for, the types of data that you care about, and really sort of speak to that stuff. We can't teach everything, so we don't want to teach everything. The other thing I'll say about this, there's a couple other sort of ROI concerns. So the first is, if you're in the state of Maryland, you can look into this. I'm not an attorney, a tax attorney or anything like that, but there are training tax credits that are available that may be applicable to cybersecurity training and other training. And maybe this can help you defray the cost of getting into a cybersecurity training program. But more importantly, rather than just getting a tax credit, my view is that if we set up a program and we make an investment into the training, but we can avoid one ransomware incident or one data breach incident or something of significance that's going to cause us downtime, data loss, liability, what have you, then these training programs will pay for themselves just through the lack of stress and effort. I mean, let's just say we take a small business and we say that this cybersecurity incident cost our team 100 hours of productivity. That 100 hours may pay for our cybersecurity awareness program. I mean, that's really not a stretch at all. And I think that's really something people should keep in mind. So we're going to do another little tip here. So what could be in a training program? If you decide, we're going to move forward on this, well, what kind of stuff do we want to train on? So the number one thing I would do for any cybersecurity training program in 2018 or 2019 is phishing and social engineering. As I mentioned in the past, these bad guys are looking to attack your users more than they are looking to attack your technology. People need to be aware of what a phishing attack might look like, what flags to look for in an email that might be phishing, what kinds of phishing attacks there could be, whether it's something designed to steal credentials or get you to volunteer information or what have you. I would really make a major focus on this right now. It's a super, super big thing, and I just think it's getting bigger. There are more phishing attacks month after month after month. There's statistics that can back this up. I would also say, we've done phishing and social engineering webinars and a lot of content on this. So if you go to our website, dpsolutions.com, you can grab more tips on this, more information. It's something I really, really believe in. We have things like mobility and safe travel. So if you are moving around a lot, I would say that teaching people what to look out for on the road is certainly worthy content to focus on. Compliance standards. So identify, most of you can probably easily identify the type of organization you are, but think about the data that is the sort of lifeblood of your technology and what's sensitive about it and what it might need to be compliant for. And if you're not really sure, at least create a standard or create a series of things that you care about that you think you might be liable for. Create your own. But whatever their standard is, you want to teach something to that effect. So if you're a medical practice, you should be teaching HIPAA. I think that kind of goes without saying. Let's say you touch a lot of credit card information. Maybe there should be a basic overview of what PCI is and what matters to your organization. Again, we're not creating compliance experts. We're creating people who understand the point of these standards and the consequences of the organization, so they make strong and sensible judgments when the time comes to react to cybersecurity incidents. Acceptable use. So we should definitely be teaching our users what is and is not okay on computers, because oftentimes they don't know. We should be teaching them about basic stuff like what sites are safe and what aren't, the phishing stuff that I brought up before. Also things like where data is allowed to be shared, where it isn't, if there's special procedures that need to be taken for specific types of data, what you're allowed to do with personal devices, such as people's own smartphones or computers they use from home, so on and so forth. These are the rules of engagement with our data. Once you touch our data, you're now a data custodian, and if you're going to touch these pieces of data that we're liable for, these are the rules you have to do. And it can all just be common sense stuff. And I also like if, let's say you've had an incident and you've had some kind of consequence to this, it's probably good to revisit. I know it might be painful to revisit it, but we want to figure out, well, what could we have learned as an organization to react differently? Even if it wasn't your fault, maybe there wasn't anything it's not somebody's fault that they fell for it, or it was a really, savvy attack that caught you. What can we glean from this that might be able to make our organization prevent this sort of attack or other attacks in the future? What can we learn? I think there's a lot of value to revisiting this stuff. The next item I want to talk about is mobile device management. Again, something that I think is really underutilized. We've been moving to the cloud. Bring your own device is here. And as a result, we have all these devices that are not managed, that are personally owned, that vary in operating system and hardware and all this stuff. And they touch data, and they're oftentimes forgotten about, or we put our heads in the sand so that we don't have to think about what has to be done with them. So mobile device management, if you're not familiar, is the ability to control the security and configuration of mobile devices as well as wipe corporate data. It forces security such as passwords, encryption, app control, and more. So if we want to set up something like password strength and say it has to be this specific types of password, or you need to have a password, it's kind of scary how many mobile devices don't have passwords set up. Or we want to make sure that the data on the device is encrypted so that if the password's there, they can't just break in and steal the data. If we want to make sure that they're only downloading specific applications, maybe there is an application that we're worried about with data sharing, we can force that. Things like that. We can all do that with a MDM solution. This can track devices that access certain data assets. So once you connect to email, it will grab all of these policies. So that's a super nice thing. We can see what devices connect and when. If we want to selectively wipe data, the employee left abruptly, or they lost their phone, or we fired them or something, we can just say, well, we want to wipe the email that's related to the corporate stuff, not wipe their family pictures, but wipe their email that belongs to us. We can do that stuff with an MDM solution. And of course, there's a bunch of other features. Implementing this and configuring this is really a function of the organization. Part of the discovery process when coming to agreement to implement a project like this is sort of hashing it out. How to use devices, what do you care about, so on and so forth. We don't want to implement an MDM without a sense of what we're looking to accomplish with the MDM, what kind of data we're looking to protect, et cetera, how you guys work. That sort of discovery is really important up front. I would just say that as we move forward, these devices are the most losable. I know so many people who lose their smartphones. If you told me, if somebody in your office said to you, I lost the smartphone today, I don't think that is a very crazy scenario. I think everybody experiences this stuff. And this is a real risk to you, because if somebody picks up that phone and does bad stuff with it, you're liable for the data breach if that could be traced back to you. And deploying this stuff and implementing it is really not that difficult or expensive either. And I just think, again, as we move into the cloud, as we become platform device agnostic and really use the types of things we want to use and the way we want to use them, I just think MDM is a super important tool that we have to embrace. Collaboration tools are the last thing we came up with, and I just made this a big, broad thing. I think we still are in the mindset of doing in-person meetings to go over things and we want to do just traditional conference calls or email and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, I believe in all of these things. Sometimes you have to meet in person. If anyone's worked with me in the past on assessments, oftentimes I'll say before I want to propose an assessment, I want to come to your office, because if it has to do with a compliance assessment, it's oftentimes having to do with things like your workflow, things you really do need to see in person. But there's a lot of value to be had, especially as we work mobile, as we have people who work in different countries sometimes, to be able to use collaboration tools like Skype for Business, which is really powerful. We use it internally here at DPS. Things like SharePoint, document management tools where you can create workflows and push data from one person to the other, tag data, so on and so forth, and really create kind of a workflow system. Things like webinars, like what we're doing today. If I wanted to teach a bunch of people about everything we could do with our phishing testing platform, which I have done in the past. The beauty about doing this in a webinar format or GoToMeeting is I can literally go to my portal, create phishing templates, send out campaigns, show data, et cetera, really demonstrate for people. And, we can talk about the value of meeting in person or having conference calls, but some things you can't do in person. It's not easy to demonstrate technology to a group of 100 people all over. These things are so inexpensive and so easy to manage and implement that we really should be embracing them in our businesses. And so I really believe in this stuff, and it's kind of surprising to me how many SMBs are sort of shy away from it and just focus purely on the email, purely on phone calls and stuff like that, and tends to be in that small SMB space. Not just that, sometimes we want to meet in person and we can't. It's just a very difficult thing now with traffic and commitments and stuff like that. If we can save that road time, I just think we should do it. So I think I'm done maybe a little bit earlier with the planned content than usual, but I wanted to create a lot of space here for questions and answers. These ideas, one of the things I would say is that these products and services are not necessarily your top 6 investments, but they're things that I think every organization, if you're going to be meeting and making plans for 2019, if you're not talking about this stuff, we're missing the mark. Maybe you don't implement them all. Maybe you don't need them all. Maybe you've already implemented some of them or have implemented all of them, and that's great. But these are things that I just think are maybe a little underutilized at the moment and really should be moved forward on, and we can do more. But that said, if there's things that I didn't touch on today that you want to get an opinion on, or got any questions about the stuff we just talked about, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll answer it right now. And I'm available to go over anything. Jill, anything coming in yet?
Yes, thanks, Ben. Yeah, we do have one question coming in. Do I really need a 4G hotspot if I'm just doing casual work stuff when I travel?
Yeah, it depends on the level of your work and what you care about in the device. So you break it down and you say, okay, first, who is the person using the device? What kind of work do they do? What kind of data are they operating on? What kind of device they're using, and where are they doing it? Just answer those basic questions. And if the answer is they are setting up the invitations for our company party next week, and they're sending out an evite, am I going to blow up if they're using their personal laptop on a Panera Wi-Fi to do that? No, I think that's pretty okay. I wouldn't tell you to buy a 4G hotspot specifically to do that kind of work. The risk here is just so low, right? What are we really at risk of losing in this kind of scenario? But if that same employee is using a device that has the client database on it, or they're going to do that and then they're going to do their taxes on it or something like that, then all of a sudden the case for implementing these 4G, like a 4G hotspot or a personal VPN or something, gets a lot easier to make. So again, you have to ask yourself, what is the person doing, and then implement the investments around that. My general rule is, the SMBs and nonprofits and all that stuff, what you ultimately know in your business is what you want to do. What is your mission? What is your goal? This is the way we want to work. And when you make these decisions, you're generally not making these decisions with technology in mind. You're making them based on goals in mind. We are a medical practice, and we are in pediatrics, and so this is the type of work we do, and this is how we see patients and stuff like that. And notice, none of these things we talk about have anything to do with the computers we're using, the technology we're using. It's entirely discussing our organization. We want to establish that stuff, what our organization is, what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and then apply the tech to that. And so it goes the same for 4G or really anything that we talk about today.
Okay, great. We did have a couple more questions come in. Next question, how long can I wait to upgrade to Windows 10 after the support ends?
I would not wait until the support ends, but if you do, you'd have to move quickly. I mean, I would look at it like sort of it's kind of like the flood waters are rising. So you have a house and it's on the top of a hill, and the water is rising around it. And January, whatever I said, I think 14th, 2020 is the day that the water reaches the front door. And then January 15th, and every day past it, the water is going to just rise into the house. And yeah, maybe you can go upstairs and have a good night's sleep in your upstairs bedroom that first night, and it's okay. But eventually the water crests, and it's not going to take long. Once that support ends and Microsoft puts the word out there that we're not going to deal with any of these flaws anymore, that's when people are going to try and look for all of these flaws to exploit. It's a hot target. They know that the people who are delaying are the most vulnerable. They're the least likely to move on these issues, and they're going to start targeting these things and cause problems. WannaCry was really targeting a lot of Windows XP stuff, and it's because it was just an easy thing for people to attack, because it was something that wasn't really managed at the time. So I think we really shouldn't wait till that due date. These changes, if you're on Windows 7, should be done well in advance. If it were up to me, and obviously it's not, but if it were up to me, I would have every client I have and every user I deal with on Windows 10 right this moment. Maybe a little bit more realistic would be by the end of June, we should be in the middle of implementation of any kind of Windows upgrade project to really make sure that we're ironing out all those things before the end of life. If we have to roll a machine back to Windows 7 while we figure out a technical problem, we should be figuring out that issue in June and not in November or December of 2019.
All right, excellent. Next question is, can I implement awareness training myself, or do I need to enlist the help of a professional?
If you have the knowledge and if you have the ability to create a program, if you have some expertise, maybe. I don't want to tell anybody that they can't do it. I mean, you could do a lot of things yourself. What we do is we use a platform where I have a lot of content, and I pick content based on the need, and I also tie in the phishing to it. So by doing that, I don't have to overthink the content too much, and I can administer it for you and keep it simple and probably do it cheaper than you could build a program yourself. So I recommend that. If you had somebody on staff who is a CIO type or a really good cybersecurity manager or compliance manager, perhaps they could create a program for you. Maybe they could write things or do PowerPoints or something like that. But I have to tell you that this sort of cost gets really significant very quickly, and it's really a lot better to outsource this stuff. It also allows the most flexibility. I mean, it's for an SMB, it's typically off purpose to build your own cybersecurity awareness training program. This is something that can be done outsourced for really a fraction of the cost and much more effectively.
Okay, great. We have one more question. It's pertaining to mobile device management. What if my staff does not want me to install management tools on their mobile devices?
Then their devices cannot connect to company assets. You have a choice when you bring your device, when you have a personal device. You can use it entirely for personal stuff, and then you can do whatever you want with it because it's your risk. It's not the company's risk. But once you grab the company's data on your phone, that is, you get company email on your phone where data maybe lives on your phone for a little bit. or you connect to the company's Dropbox account, or whatever. You're able to access sensitive data that should not be shared privately or breached or anything like that. You have decided to give up a little bit of freedom on that phone. Now, it doesn't have to be a huge sacrifice here, right? Like, I have mobile device management on my phone with DPS, and it means that they can wipe the email off my phone. That's a fair thing. It's not like DPS has access to everything on my phone, or can wipe my entire device, or can see every text message or email I write that's not having to do with DPS. But it gives them the option to do things with my phone. But I accepted that trade-off. I could have also said, you know what, I'm just not going to use the phone for this stuff, and that's it. And I think that's a real choice to make. You could tell your staff, here's your own iPhone issued by the company, and you can't do anything you want on it, anything you want at all on it. This is what the function is, and you have no control over it. But obviously, that's very expensive. I think the better solution for most people, most organizations, is to have the BYOD policy where people can bring their own devices in, but we have an inventory of them, we manage them, there is some rules set up, and we have visibility on those devices to do basic, simple security things that don't cause real user problems, but create some kind of level of security.
Okay, it looks like all the questions that we have for now.
All right, great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Right here you can see my contact information. Feel free to reach out, email, call, whatever. And our website too, we have a lot of content on the website. We send out security tips weekly too, so if you want to get on the security tips list, we're sending out education all the time. As anyone who's been on these webinars and security tips know in the past, we've made a major effort, and we continue to make an effort. We're gonna do more and more of this, I think, into the future, to bring information to our clients and educate them and teach them things. It's SMBs in particular are really put in a position where they have to make difficult decisions without all the information available to them. And our hope is, by giving more content, giving more information, giving you guys stuff like this, that we can make things just a little bit easier to make decisions and make you better informed about what's out there and what can be done. So we really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great new year and a wonderful holiday season. And we look forward to seeing you in 2019.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody. And we will be emailing out a copy of the webinar later this afternoon. Thanks, everybody. Happy holidays.